"You three don't belong here." Brenda, the flight attendant, screamed, her face flushed red with anger. "These seats cost more than your parents make in a month. I don't know how you snuck up here, but this is first class, not some daycare center." The three girls sat perfectly still in their leather seats, their hands folded in their laps, their expressions calm despite the verbal assault raining down on them. Passengers around them fumbled for their phones, some already recording the unbelievable scene unfolding before their eyes. Whispers of disbelief rippled through the cabin as Brenda's voice grew louder and more venomous. "Ma'am," said Stacy, the eldest of the triplets, her voice steady and respectful despite the chaos, "we have every right to be here." Her calm response only seemed to fuel Brenda's rage further. The flight attendant's hands shook as she pointed at the girls, her professional composure completely shattered. Other passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, shocked murmurs filling the air as they witnessed what was becoming an explosive confrontation at cruising altitude. But what Brenda Moore didn't know at that moment would not only end her 15-year career in aviation, it would destroy her life completely in the next 20 minutes. If you want to see how this shocking confrontation ends and how justice was served, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Tell me in the comments, have you ever witnessed discrimination like this in public? How would you have reacted in this situation? The triplets' secret was about to transform a moment of hatred into a lesson that would echo through the entire aviation industry. To understand the profound composure these three girls displayed under such vicious attack, you need to know their story. Stacy, Jane, and Vera Theodore weren't just any 12-year-olds. They were triplets who had learned to navigate the world with a grace that came from both privilege and profound loss. Stacy, born just minutes before her sisters, had naturally stepped into the role of protector and leader. Her dark eyes held a wisdom that seemed far beyond her years. Jane, the quiet observer, absorbed everything around her with an intensity that made adults uncomfortable. She saw what others missed, remembered what others forgot. And Vera, the peacemaker, possessed an emotional intelligence that could calm storms and heal wounds with just her presence. These girls had been raised by their father, Frank Theodore, after losing their mother to cancer when they were just 7 years old. That devastating loss had forged an unbreakable bond between father and daughters. Every week, Frank made time for their special tradition, flying together, just the four of them, across the country on various routes. It wasn't just about travel, it was about connection, about healing, about rebuilding their family in the sky where their mother's spirit felt closest. Frank had taught them something their peers couldn't understand: true strength. He would tell them during their flights, "Isn't about fighting back when someone hurts you. It's about maintaining your dignity when everything inside you wants to crumble. That's when you discover who you really are." Those words echoed in Stacy's mind as Brenda's verbal assault continued to intensify. But Brenda Moore saw none of this depth, none of this pain transformed into strength. All she saw were three black children in seats she believed they didn't deserve. At 52, Brenda had spent 15 years serving passengers in cramped airplane cabins, watching wealthy families treat her like she was invisible. Her own financial struggles had grown worse each year. Medical bills from her mother's recent stroke, credit card debt that seemed to multiply overnight, and the bitter realization that she would never rise above her current position. Today, something inside Brenda had snapped. Maybe it was the eviction notice she'd received that morning, or the way her supervisor had dismissed her concerns about scheduling again. Whatever it was, these three composed children in their expensive seats became the target for 15 years of accumulated resentment. "Show me your tickets right now," Brenda demanded, her voice carrying through the entire cabin. "I want to see proof that you belong in these seats because I know you don't." The girls exchanged glances, a silent communication that twins and triplets share. Stacy reached calmly into her small purse and produced 3 first-class boarding passes. Brenda snatched them away, studying them as if they might be forgeries. "These could be fake," she declared loudly. "Kids like you don't fly first class unless someone made a mistake." "Jane," the quiet observer, had already begun documenting everything on her phone, her fingers moving with surprising speed as she typed detailed notes about each insult, each accusation. She had learned from her father that truth needed to be preserved, especially when people tried to rewrite it later. Vera, meanwhile, noticed an elderly woman across the aisle beginning to shake with distress at the confrontation. Without drawing attention to herself, Vera caught the woman's eye and offered the smallest, most reassuring smile, a gesture that somehow conveyed that everything would be okay. "Your clothes don't even match," Brenda continued, her voice growing shriller. "Look at you. You're probably wearing hand-me-downs and thinking you can pretend to be something you're not." The attack on their appearance stung because the girls had dressed carefully for their flight, choosing outfits their father had helped them pick out. But Stacy's response remained measured. "Ma'am, we're just trying to enjoy our flight. We haven't done anything wrong." Her calm only seemed to infuriate Brenda further. How dare these children maintain their composure when she was falling apart? Around them, the cabin had become a theater of tension. Business executive Joan Sanders, returning from a merger meeting in London, found herself gripping her armrests so tightly her knuckles had turned white. She kept starting to stand up, then hesitating, torn between her instinct to intervene and her uncertainty about getting involved. Melody Wilson, a 78-year-old grandmother flying to visit her great-grandchildren, shook her head in disgust at what she was witnessing. She had lived through the civil rights movement, had seen hatred up close, and recognized it immediately in Brenda's voice. Other passengers throughout first class had begun discreetly recording the confrontation on their phones, though none yet understood they were documenting what would become one of the most viral incidents in aviation history. In the cockpit, Captain Louis Morrison received his first concerned report from a passenger who had pressed the call button. "Captain, we have a situation in first class. The flight attendant is, well, she's screaming at some children. It's getting really bad." But the worst was yet to come. Brenda, seeing that her initial attacks hadn't broken the girl's composure, decided to escalate to the cruelest weapon in her arsenal. "You know what?" she screamed, loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "You're nobodies. This isn't a charity flight, and I don't care what sob story got you these seats. You don't belong here with real people." The words hung in the air like poison. Jane's fingers stopped moving over her phone. Vera's small hand reached for Stacy's. And for just a moment, the eldest triplet's composure flickered. Hit that subscribe button if you're as shocked as I am by what you're hearing. Because what these girls were about to reveal would turn this flight attendant's world completely upside down. Let me know in the comments, what would you have done if you witnessed this happening? Would you have intervened or stayed silent? Because what happened next would prove that sometimes the people you underestimate the most are the ones with the most power to change your life forever. As Brenda's cruel words echoed through the cabin, calling 3 innocent children nobodies, something shifted in the atmosphere. The passengers had moved beyond uncomfortable. They were witnessing something that felt morally wrong on the deepest level. But what none of them realized was that they were about to witness one of the most stunning reversals of power in aviation history. Stacy Theodore took a deep breath, the way her father had taught her during their grief counseling sessions after her mother's death. She had learned that sometimes you have to let people reveal who they truly are before you reveal who you truly are. With the same quiet dignity that had carried her through her mother's funeral, she looked up at Brenda and spoke with crystal clarity. "Ma'am, I'd like to speak to management, please." Brenda threw back her head and laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that made several passengers flinch. "Management?" she sneered. "Oh, honey, management is going to take one look at you 3 troublemakers and escort you right off this plane. You think calling for my supervisor is going to help you? They'll just confirm what I already know. You don't belong here." But Jane, who had been quietly documenting every word, every gesture, every moment of this 20-minute nightmare, looked up from her phone with an expression that seemed far too knowing for a 12-year-old. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but in the tense silence of the cabin, everyone heard her clearly. She should probably stop talking now. There was something in the way Jane said it. Not a threat, not anger, but a kind of sad certainty that made the hair on several passengers' arms stand up. It was the voice of someone who knew something devastating was about to happen. Vera, the empathetic peacemaker who had spent the entire confrontation trying to comfort distressed passengers around them, cast a worried glance toward the front of the plane. Her young face showed genuine concern, not for herself, but for what was about to unfold. She had seen this look in her father's eyes before, the quiet moment before justice was served. Throughout the first-class cabin, passengers began to sense that something much bigger was happening than a simple case of discrimination. The way these children carried themselves, the way they spoke, the way they seemed to be waiting for something, it didn't match what they were witnessing. Joan Sanders, the business executive, found herself studying the girls more carefully. There was something familiar about their composure, something that reminded her of boardroom dynamics she knew well. These weren't children who were afraid. These were children who were strategically patient. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, Captain Louis Morrison was reviewing the passenger manifest for the first time since takeoff. His eyes scanned the list routinely until they stopped dead on 3 names in seats 2A, 2B, and 2C. Theodore Stacy. Theodore, Jane, Theodore, Vera. The coffee cup in his hand began to shake. Theodore, on a Skyline Airways flight, in first class. With trembling fingers, Captain Louis reached for his secure phone and dialed corporate headquarters. The call was answered on the first ring. "This is Captain Morrison on Flight 447, he said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "I need to confirm something immediately. Do we have the Theodore family on board today?" The silence on the other end of the line stretched for what felt like an eternity before the corporate liaison's voice came back, heavy with implications. "Captain, Frank Theodore's daughters are on your flight, and sir, he's already en route to meet the plane." At that very moment, 37,000 feet below them, Frank Theodore sat in the back of his private car, his phone showing the real-time location of his daughter's flight. The location app he had installed on their phones for safety had started buzzing with unusual activity. Multiple notifications indicating the girls were accessing their devices more frequently than normal during a flight. Something was wrong. A father's instinct, honed sharp by years of raising 3 daughters alone, told him his girls were in trouble. He had already redirected his schedule, already made calls, already set wheels in motion. Because if someone was hurting his children, they were about to learn exactly who they had chosen to target. Back in the cabin, the moment had finally arrived. Stacy Theodore stood up slowly, her small frame somehow commanding the attention of every person in first class. The 20 minutes of verbal abuse, of being called names, of having her dignity systematically attacked, had led to this moment. "Ma'am," Stacy said, her voice carrying a new weight, "I think you should know something." Brenda crossed her arms, still smirking with the confidence of someone who believed she held all the power. "Oh, what's that, sweetie? Going to tell me another story about how you belong here?" Stacy's dark eyes met Brenda's directly, and when she spoke, her words were clear and precise. "We're the Theodore girls. Our father is Frank Theodore." For a moment, the name didn't register. Brenda's expression remained mocking, dismissive. But then, like watching a building collapse in slow motion, recognition began to dawn on her face. "Frank Theodore," she repeated slowly, her voice beginning to waver. "Frank Theodore, as in the CEO and majority owner of Skyline Airways," Stacy finished quietly. "Yes, ma'am, that's our father." The color drained from Brenda's face so rapidly that Melody Wilson later told reporters she thought the woman might faint. Brenda's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, no sound emerging as the full weight of what she had done crashed down on her. She had spent 20 minutes systematically abusing the children of the man who owned the airline, the man who signed her paychecks, the man who could end her career with a single phone call. The cabin fell into absolute silence, broken only by the steady hum of the engines. Every passenger understood they had just witnessed something extraordinary. The moment when absolute power revealed itself in the hands of 3 12-year-old girls who had endured hatred with dignity. Captain Louis's voice crackled over the intercom. "Flight Attendant Moore, Please report to the cockpit immediately." But before Brenda could move, another voice filled the cabin. Warm, authoritative, and unmistakably protective. Frank Theodore's voice transmitted from the ground through the aircraft's communication system. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Frank Theodore, CEO of Skyline Airways. I want to personally apologize for what my daughters and you have been forced to endure today. What you've witnessed is not representative of our company's values or the character of our employees. I also want to say how proud I am of Stacy, Jane, and Vera for handling the situation with more grace and dignity than most adults could manage." The cabin erupted in spontaneous applause. Passengers who had been silent observers for 20 minutes suddenly found their voices, calling out support for the girls, expressing their disgust at what they had witnessed, praising the composure these children had shown under attack. If you're as amazed as I am by these girls' incredible strength, smash that subscribe button, because what happened to Brenda next will leave you speechless. Tell me in the comments, how do you think you would have handled this situation? Could you have stayed as calm as these incredible girls? Because while the passengers were celebrating, Brenda Moore's world was about to crumble completely, and the consequences would be more devastating than anyone could have imagined. What happened next unfolded with the swift precision of justice that had been too long delayed. Captain Louis's voice returned to the intercom, but this time his words carried the weight of corporate authority and moral clarity. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Effective immediately, Flight Attendant Brenda Moore has been terminated from Skyline Airways for conduct unbecoming of our company values and for the unconscionable treatment of passengers, specifically 3 young passengers who showed more professionalism and dignity than a 15-year veteran of our staff." The announcement sent shockwaves through the cabin. Passengers had never heard of an employee being fired mid-flight, broadcast over the intercom for everyone to hear. But Frank Theodore's voice followed immediately, filled with the protective fury of a father and the decisive action of a CEO. "To every passenger who witnessed this appalling display, please accept my personal apology and my commitment that this will never happen again on any Skyline Airways flight. Your first-class tickets today are fully refunded. You'll receive vouchers for future travel, and our customer service team will be reaching out to each of you personally." Brenda stood frozen in the aisle, her career ending in real time as hundreds of passengers watched her professional destruction unfold. The woman who had called 3 children nobodies had herself become nobody in the span of a single announcement. But the consequences extended far beyond that airplane cabin. Multiple passengers had recorded the entire 20-minute confrontation, and within hours of landing, those videos exploded across social media platforms. The hashtags #Theodore Triplet's Grace began trending worldwide as millions of people watched 3 12-year-old girls handle racial abuse with a composure that shamed adults everywhere. News outlets from CNN to BBC picked up the story. "CEO's daughters show grace under fire," read the headlines. "When hate meets dignity, the Skyline Airways incident that changed everything." Brenda's face became synonymous with workplace discrimination and professional misconduct. Her name became unemployable not just in aviation, but in any customer service industry. The viral impact created an unexpected corporate victory for Skyline Airways. For months, the company had been fighting off a hostile takeover attempt by a larger airline conglomerate. But as public support poured in for the company's ethical stance and the Theodore family's dignity, Skyline stock prices soared. The takeover attempt collapsed as investors recognized that some things were more valuable than profit margins, like integrity and corporate character. Upon landing, Brenda was escorted off the plane by airport security, her belongings packed in a small box, her 15-year career reduced to a cautionary tale that would be told in business schools for decades to come. The Theodore triplets, meanwhile, became symbols of something much larger than themselves. Business magazines featured them as examples of grace under pressure. Harvard Business School used their story in case studies about crisis management and emotional intelligence. Corporate diversity training programs across the country showed videos of their composure, asking executives, Could you maintain this level of dignity under attack? But perhaps the most profound changes happened within the family itself. Frank Theodore had always been proud of his daughters, but seeing them handle hatred with such grace deepened his understanding of the extraordinary young women they were becoming. The crisis had tested every lesson he had taught them about dignity, about strength, about who they were in the world, and they had passed with honors that no school could award. The girls themselves began to understand their privilege and responsibility in new ways. They realized that their composure hadn't just protected them, it had protected their father's company, influenced public discourse about discrimination, and given millions of people hope that dignity could triumph over hatred. Skyline Airways implemented the most comprehensive sensitivity training program in the aviation industry. Other airlines followed suit, recognizing that the public would no longer tolerate discrimination, disguised as customer service. The incident sparked industry-wide policy changes regarding passenger treatment, employee accountability, and corporate response to discrimination. Brenda's story became a cautionary tale told in customer service training programs across multiple industries. This is what happens when personal prejudice destroys professional judgment. This is how a career ends. This is why character matters more than seniority. But the Theodore family's response revealed something even more powerful. Quietly, without fanfare, Frank established a scholarship fund for aviation education, specifically targeted at underrepresented communities. The girls insisted that part of their story include this message, that privilege comes with responsibility, and that true strength lies not in wealth or power, but in how you treat others when you think no one important is watching. Years later, Frank Theodore would reflect on that flight as one of the most difficult and proud moments of his life. He had taught his daughters about dignity under pressure during their weekly flights together, never imagining they would need those lessons at 35,000 feet, facing hatred from someone who should have been protecting them. True power, he would tell business leaders in speeches about corporate responsibility, isn't about who you can hurt. It's about who you choose to protect. It's about maintaining your character when everything around you is falling apart. My daughters taught me that day that sometimes the smallest people in the room can be the strongest. The triplets learned that dignity isn't just about how you carry yourself. It's about how you change the world around you through your response to injustice. They discovered that grace under pressure doesn't just protect you, it transforms everyone who witnesses it. The lasting impact of choosing dignity over retaliation rippled far beyond that single flight. It reminded millions of people that how we respond to hatred defines not just who we are, but who we inspire others to become. And Brenda Moore? Her moment of prejudice revealed her true character and cost her everything. Because in the end, how we treat others when we think no one important is watching reveals exactly who we are. And sometimes, the people we think aren't important turn out to be the most important of all. If this incredible story of dignity triumphing over hatred moved you as much as it moved me, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. Because stories like this remind us that character always wins in the end. The Theodore girls proved that sometimes the most powerful response to hatred isn't anger, it's grace. And sometimes that grace doesn't just change your own life, it changes the world. If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and share with others so they can learn too. See you in our next video.